Hey everyone, welcome to the video of the solutions for this, the C Sharp Player's Guide C Sharp 13 expansion. I want to get started with just a little overview of this expansion before going into the solutions. And I'm just going to record all of this as one video, and then I'll just break it up into chapters on YouTube so you can find the solutions. So this C Sharp 13 is honestly a very small expansion. And so there's not a whole lot of meat in here. I and that's okay. That's just some updates are smaller than others. So mostly what I've done is I've taken advantage of the fact that there isn't a lot of new features that need new challenges to add in a handful of challenges that will like fill in some spots that I feel like a lot of readers struggle with to give people a little more experience and maybe a different like lens to look at some of these existing features through. Now, I've tried to tie in the C Sharp 13 features when possible. They there's not a lot of features that need a lot of like hands-on practice to understand. So I'm not like most of these features don't have a challenge, and the challenges mostly are kind of independent of that. So as I'm writing the solutions, I'm kind of assuming that you are aware of C Sharp 11 and 12 features. There's separate expansions for those. So I'll maybe use some features that aren't directly in the book. I'll try and call those out when I do it. But that's where it's at. So of course, like if you want to use these features, you got to make sure your Visual Studio is up to date. You're using the latest version of .NET, because we'll need .NET 9 for this. But yeah, so aside from that, it's time to just get into these challenges. I don't think this will take too long, but let's do this. I'm going to move uh, the expansion off screen. I can still see it. You guys can't, but that's so that you can see this Visual Studio here. Let me make sure that font's big enough. Um, so we'll just go through these. So the first challenge is the 6 staffs of Eleged. And this is a fairly straightforward challenge. The whole point is to just use the /e escape character escape sequence, the escape character escape sequence, and to just like use some color that's not the normal thing. So we'll start with the text we're supposed to display. So it looks like that. This will just display it in white. And so what we need now is to just add in the escape sequence. So in the past you could have done /x1b, and now we can just do /e. That's the new C Sharp 13 thing. And then we need to put in the right command, which I've done this recently enough that I've got it memorized, but often I have to look it up. So square bracket M, and then in between that you put the command, which in this case is 38 for setting the foreground color, 2, which sets the color scheme to be this like full color where you have RGB values between 0 and 255. So, well, let me start with the orange that's in the book. But that's orange. So a red channel fully maxed out at 255, a yellow channel, a green channel halfway, and no blue. That gets us orange. So if I do this, this whole thing will set us to orange. This will be orange. We don't change the color between here and here, so we'll just get all orange. There it is. Obviously, we don't want that. We want a specific color. And so that will be 89, 12, 131. Make sure you use semicolons here. Like commonly with colors, it's like commas, R, comma, G, comma, B. In this case, these are semicolons, so make sure you're using that. If you put commas, it won't work. So now we'll get the right color for Decollete, which is this deep purple. And then we would just put in the other ones for the other colors. Now I can do that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and put this in a separate string, just so that I've noticed this. I don't know why, but it is like decoding that /e into that slash, the this /u001b. I do want to use, like, we have /e now, so we should use it. So let me just like define these colors up here. Update them in here. Like that. And so that's all the data. And now we just got to put it in here. So I'm going to do string interpolation and put a place to put these. And I'll just put them in. For me, I feel like this is easier to understand by like introducing these strings ahead of time, because now I have a name for that like these really weird patterns. And like when I'm dealing with these, like I can say, okay, well, I know what this is. And but down here and maybe like sometimes I'll like, it isn't just amaranth, it's amaranth color. Like I'll put something in there to, or amaranth foreground color, something like that. If you've done that, it's fine. If you've just taken this stuff and just embedded it directly in here, that is going to be okay too. Now I can run this and we'll get the correct different colors. So again, a lot of variations on it. Again, there's never one specific right way to do it. There's always a lot of ways that it can be done. So if yours looks a little different than this, as long as you're getting the right output, as long as you're getting that /e in there, you should be just fine. I'll say that if your console window, and I've asked a bunch of people, it feels like the different console windows on Windows and Mac and Linux seem to support these colors. If your console window does not support this color, like if it's just showing white, if for example you do console.foreground color equals console color dot red and it doesn't turn red, your console just might not support color at all. And if so, it's not worth jumping through a bunch of hoops. The reality is, if you're doing a lot of console stuff, usually color isn't something you care about deeply. And if you're not doing console stuff, if you're making a game, if you're making a website, if you're making a desktop application where you do care about color, you have totally different ways to handle this. So you don't like, this is the main reason that I thought, oh, this is interesting, is because now I hope readers can, especially in the boss battles where we put, invest a fair bit of time into it. I hope that people can look at it and say, I'm willing to pick this up and run with it. Like I can add color. And for what it's worth, and the expansion mentions this, like I could come in here, for example, and do another one of these /e. And I don't, let's see, I think it's 40, I think 48 is the for a background color. So like I can do, let's see, I don't know, like we could just do like a kind of a dark gray. Let's do 20 20 20. And so now like we're gonna set the background color. Like you can go look up, the link is in the expansion. It's there. It's there, but that was so subtle. Let's go a little higher. I can see it, but I don't know if that'll show up in the recording. So let me do, yeah. So now hopefully that's dark, that's light enough. We've made it. So it's still a dark gray, but like, so anyway, point being, like there's a lot of control here. You can do underline, you could do italics. Like it just depends on what your console supports. Strike through, like there's a lot that you can do with this. And I'm hoping that this like exploration of like, oh, what could be done with these ANSI control sequences might give you some ideas on ways that you can make your expansions a little, or your like boss battles that are fairly involved, a little more interesting to look at. More color options, which I think, like I said, my take is these colors that are here, they look really nice compared to just the 16 console colors that you get out of the box. You'll notice that my window still has that background color set to that kind of dark gray. And until somebody turns it off, it's going to keep using it. So that's one thing that's interesting about the console window, is it's very stateful. So I actually deleted the part that did the console window. yeah, if I close this, it'll go away. So like that's always been an issue with the console windows. It's very safe. Like even without this stuff, like when you say console color dot foreground color equals red and then you display some sort of like error message, you have to reset that. Like that's always been a thing. So anyway, enough about that. Like I said, always a lot of variations that you can do here. If you did it differently, it's fine as long as you use the /E. You're good. All right, on to the next challenge. So the second challenge in this expansion is called Finding the Henges, and we are going to, and the intent here is to use enumerations and tuples a little more. And so I'm going to, I still have my code from the previous challenge up, and so let's see, this has created a henge enumeration, and so technically speaking, actually I put public because that's a default. I don't know that we've mentioned public. I'll leave that off. But so enum henge, and then we list our henges. Like that. And then it says to make a method with a signature. So it's a tuple type, int string get information, and we pass in the henge enumeration value. So this is definitely a more complicated method than you've maybe seen because its return type is a tuple type. And but this actually helps, like the advantage of a tuple here is we are able to combine multiple bits of information that they're supposed to live together at least temporarily. And in this case, it's the XY location and then like a string description, the color. And so all we need to do is, so like if like we could say, for example, in the example they have in there, um, we could say return 0b0111 0b0111 and then /E. Like it gives us the challenge description gives us this as a sample. 71, 79, 165 MK. And just to kind of pick that apart, this is the XY coordinate, and we don't have to do that conversion. We just place it in there, and like the compiler figures this out. Feel like maybe it has to be running or something. I feel like I've seen times where I can just hover over this and it'll just tell me what it is. Like these are just integer values and they're actually relatively small. Like let's see, so this is 1 plus a 2 plus a 4. So this is 7. That's what that is. If we start with 0b, then it's a binary thing and we can write 0 1 0 1 1 1 0 1 and it works. We don't, like we could convert these ourselves, but we don't need to convert them. It just works. And so it was actually just a random afterthought I had in defining the challenge, that it would be kind of cool if it's like, we don't know what these numbers mean. It's all encoded in binary and that it just works anyway. But like, yeah, so, but like, you don't have to use these for this kind of stuff. But the point is that these, like C# supports these binary literals, but you probably won't use them too often. I'm other than like a tinkering or like an experiment or an illustration, I can't name a time where I use these. There probably is, but and understanding like at a bit level, like what do the number patterns look like has been useful to me. Like I've done other stuff where using the individual bits, the bit manipulation, like that's been useful. But in terms of just writing a binary literal, it doesn't that hasn't usually been that useful to me. Now, I will say that that's just the type of work that I do. And there are, I'm sure, other C# programmers out there that use these binary literals a lot. And that might be you. So it's good to be aware of it. But mostly, it's not that that was useful or valuable. Mostly, it was just that, hey, this is a cool way to like, it's all encoded, from a storytelling standpoint. Anyway, this is the same sort of like escape sequences as we've seen up above with the K, the letter, embedded directly in here. So like that's that is, this is the right one for Keppel, but we do want all of them. So we could say, so if henge equals henge.keppel, return that, and then do this for, all of them. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to return and switch. I'm going to use a switch expression because I think this is well suited to that. And so now I can just do henge.keppel arrow this stuff here. And then I just need just duplicate that a bunch of times, and then I just need to get my other numbers in here. Like using white space to like organize what I've got. And then at this point now it's just a matter of just copying all the values that are in the challenge description. And do the same for the colors here. Remember to do semicolons between these values and not commas. And then I got to change the letters or they'll all be the same. And then it says, so we've got the method. So again, like the intent of this, and actually there's one other change I can do here, is I can make this an expression bodied method. Since this is all just a single expression, I can actually simplify this even further and just do that. And I honestly, ever since I've learned about switches, like this is a common pattern for me, is the entire method is an expression body with a switch. Now, this warning is saying, hey, there's other variations that have not been covered, but the only way to get those would be if I'm using like bad data, and I'm gonna not do that. So I'm not worried about that particular issue. This is saying I could make it static, which is true. I'm gonna not worry about that here. And then it's declared but not used. So we'll fix that now. So we've got our method that does this. And again, like the intent here is like now I can call this method and get back a bundle of data that's all related. And so the next thing is create a henge array. And I'm just going to just like do this by hand, right? And again, if you're not using, I think this is a C#11 feature, but it's not covered in the book. This like array expression or collection expression, like the alternative would be new henge like that. I just, this new form is way more fun, way simpler. So there I've made an array, and like I said, in this case, I've just right, in this case, I've just made this array by hand, and I like that this is a normal thing. Like this is fine. This is a very reasonable thing to do, especially where you only have those 6 items. There is another way you can do it, and that is enum dot get values. And then you don't have to write it out yourself. It's just that this uses generics. Those angle brackets are, that's using generics, which is a more advanced feature. Now, I will say that like this, it's fairly intuitive. Like you can, like if you needed to do the same thing for a different enumeration, like it's pretty intuitive. So don't feel too bad about showing this, and perhaps in, C sharp or in the 6th edition, I'll introduce this. But it does use generics, and I don't feel comfortable to just throw generics at people full force at this point. So if you want to use this enum.getValues with the generic type, that's fine. But I also think that this version is also fine. And like this there's some nuance here, right? Like I could change the order here and make it whatever I want. If I want to put them in alphabetical order or something, like I can do that. I can change the order. So there are, even if you were aware of that generic get values method, sometimes this is the right call anyway. But all right. So all we need to do now is iterate through these. And do, so then it gives us this some sample code here for what could be done to display it, and we need to like rework it because it gives us that set cursor position. And so basically what we have, so let's do it this way. We have a method that gives us that information. We just need a variable to store it in. Int string data equals that, right? So now we have our data, and this is a tuple type variable. And we could so at this point we could say data dot item 1, that's X, data item 2, and then down here data dot item 3, right? Like we could, that actually, this works. However, I like giving these names. This is like the limitation of tuples is that their names are very ephemeral. Like I could have put names right here, and they wouldn't matter once I get back up here. Like there's no, like it could have meant something different. Anyway, I like that's the limitation of tuples, and it's the reason why I think at the state we're at in the book right now, we don't have the full set of tools. We don't have, in particular, classes, or structs, or records, or some of these other similar things to classes, and that's okay. So tuples are the first tool we are aware of that allows us to create a blob of like multi-part data. And that is extremely valuable. When we learn about these other tools, tuples become kind of not the thing we'd normally choose. Like classes and structs and records are better in most cases, but there is still like even in this case where it's like some short-lived association of the data, tuples can make sense. If you have a menu and you just need to be able to say like there's a cost and a like the name of the item, a tuple could work for that, or something like that. Like tuples make sense still for these small. I need to combine this data just for like a short-lived little thing. I don't need to like define a whole class for it. That's when tuples still make sense. But anyway, now that I've given those names, this is gonna complain gently that I'm not using those names. So let's flip it over to use those names. And that, I think, should do it. Let's run this. And there it is. That looks good. So I got the little triangle pattern that it was expected here. Um, Everything's colored like I'd expect. And like I said, I didn't have to figure out like what these values meant, though you can. But anyway, so that is the second challenge. And like I said, the intent here is to like get a like there's no user input here. So I've tried to like eliminate the user input. The challenges in the book for enumerations and tuples have like they kind of bury you in user input stuff. So hopefully this gives people a different like take on how tuples could be useful. Is like I'm like here's a pile of data that is associated with these enumeration values, and I can return the entire bundle and work with that bundle. Um, as a pile. Like I can do something. Like I could even make another method here that's like int string, right? Like I could actually take this stuff here and put this in another method if I wanted, and then I could just do something like names consistent. Back to that in a second, but now I can like do display data. So like I can pass this around as a bundle. Now that I've done this, like again, like these names and these names don't align, so these names don't share with that. So like I can do A, B, C, and now I can like these will be called A, B, and C, which is again the catch or the point of like the limitation of tuples. I need whatever the heck that is. Because the names don't like they're not like a permanent part of things, which is why tuples I think are great for short-lived things, but for long-lived things you want the nuance. You want to have things that have like or like permanent names and things like that. There's just a little more structure to the tools that we'll get to in time. But again, hopefully this starts to make it a little more clear, like when you might use tuples and like the value of tuples, and maybe a little more, another example of an enumeration pulling some weight without being flooded with user input. So you do not need to make a display method. It's just a for example. And put this back. But yeah, so hopefully that illustrates a little better why you'd use tuples or like the value of tuples a little better than some of the challenges that are in the book. All right, on to the third challenge. This one's called Amaranth and Jasmine, and this is definitely a little harder challenge. This gives us some code to work with, and like the goal of this challenge is to like get some experience working with multiple classes and multiple objects, and because we haven't done these in any of the challenges or really even seen it in the book. So this is a good place to start to like understand like how these pieces can go together, because this is going to get important. Like the purpose of objects and classes is that we can break down the whole thing into smaller pieces, and then we can kind of zoom in on each piece and think about each piece individually. But at some level, the pieces need to come back together, right? They have to fit together, and this will get us some hands-on experience with fitting these pieces together. So it's definitely, if you haven't done this kind of stuff before, maybe in another language or maybe in C#, like it's gonna feel a little challenging. There's a reason this is a 200 XP challenge. All right, so we're gonna just work through these. So this says we need to repair the location class, and we need it to have X and Y properties. So public int X. It could be as simple as that, and then Y is that, and then we can add a constructor. Like I'm just using auto properties here. If you chose to do like this and then do something like that, that's fine. But I like if an auto property works, I'm going to always prefer that. This is simpler code to me. It does the exact same thing, just the compiler makes the field for you. And then we need a, well, we don't need a constructor, but I'm going to add one. And that's it. So that's the whole thing for the location thing. I will say that, like, so primary constructors, I think that's a C#11 feature. Um, I've actually really been liking that feature, um, because again, it makes for simpler code. So this is the same thing with just with a primary constructor. Um, that's covered in, like I said, it's not in the main book. It's in one of the expansions. I forget whether that's a C#11 or 12 feature, but this is the exact same thing. It's just rearranged a little bit. And I'm going to keep using that here. But again, remember, if you prefer it the other way, like, don't feel like you have to do it this way or that this is like objectively better. It depends, and part of that depends on what you like. So if you don't like this structure, then don't use it. It's fine. You should be aware of it because you'll see it, but you don't have to use it if you don't like it. All right, color is basically the same thing, other than that we don't need settable properties. And that's all there is to it. So like I said, the main thing here is we just don't need these to be settable. And again, if you'd used a not primary constructor, if you just made a new constructor, like that is the more general purpose tool. Like, there are plenty of times where that's just what you need to do. These primary constructors only work if the only setup you need to do can be done as like expressions on these initializers, which is true in this case. Anyway, so there we've got the color, like that one's done. And then this is perhaps the trickiest part, is getting the henge class to work, because um, now we are reusing these types that we just made. We are reusing location and color. So public color, it doesn't need to be settable, and public location again, doesn't need a setter. And then we need a public. I'm just going to make all of those set only. I have a bias for set only. Like, if I don't know that it needs to be changed, making it set only is a good default. And now I just need to like update all of these. It's nice that it's suggesting that like AI based autocomplete has come a long way. It's actually kind of nice that it's able to like look at my code and like guess what I'm doing and be right more often than not. So then we also need to make this display method work, which we had code like this in the previous challenge. So let me just kind of grab what we did over there. It's basically this right here. If you rewrote this from by hand, it's fine. But so this is just get the X and Y from that. And then, so the catch here is the color stuff is different. So color dot get color text. So we write that, and then we write the representation. And if you did these on two separate lines, like you did console.write get color text and then console.write representation, that's fine too. Like, this is valid code. Just gonna leave that up there though. I like it better that way. In theory, that should do it. Oh, he came back again. What do I must be pushing something weird that's bringing that in. So the piece that's left now is to make the main method do this. And again, this part can be a little tricky, because what we need is we need to make two henges. Right? And the tricky part here is, so I can make a new henge. Like, that's fairly straightforward. But I need to, like, its constructor looks a particular way. It needs what do they need? A location and a color and a character. So somehow I need a location, and I could do something like this: location, and it tells us the numbers to use for this. They were 3 and 2. So like we could do that, and then just say amaranth location, and then we also need a color. Like that, and then we can pass in like this. So in order to create the full object, because it has these other objects that are like under it, the location and the color, we're using 3 new expressions. Like we're using 3 of these to create new objects. But so for example, I don't need it. Like I don't need to make variables for all these. It's like I can just put that down there. I can do the same with this. And again, this is if this makes this line down here too complex for you, don't do it. As you get more experience, these things it'll be easier to understand these more complex expressions. Um, if you if it's hard to understand, then split it up. And the reality is yes, as you get more experience, it will start to look like more complex expressions will just make sense to you. But some people just like it broken down more, and some people like it packed in more, and that's a personal preference. And I'm one that trends kind of hard toward the like just more like this versus the multiple variables, because for me like it's fairly straightforward to understand what this line does rather than having 4 lines of setup for this one thing. But that is definitely like I have my reasons for it. Like I think they're very justified. But there are other programmers that I have worked with that are very, very experienced, and they would have written this with multiple variables to give names to those things, and they're not wrong in that. So if you prefer it the other way, like it's your code, do what you're comfortable with, because you're the one who has to understand it and maintain it and all that stuff. So you need something that you're happy with, not something that matches what I did. Um, so let's just get this other one in here, and then we'll be done with this challenge. So used to semicolons that I did it in the wrong spot. All right, there we go. And then all we need to do is amaranth dot display and jasmine dot display, and we should be able to run that and get 2 things like in their correct locations. And there we go. Yeah, that looks right to me. So that is the 3rd challenge. I don't think I've got anything else to say other than, like I said, this combining all these classes and like the fact that we've used color and location as property types here to create this complex thing that's made out of complex things themselves. Like we could have just said, well, I'm going to give Henge an int x, int y, int r, int g, int b, or maybe we use bytes for those. Byte r, byte g, byte b, character representation. Like we could have done it that way, but I think that this gives us more room to reuse colors on their own and to reuse locations on their own. Like those are their own concepts, and having these different objects, I think, is a good thing in general. All right, on to the final challenge, the Henges of Eleged, and this is so we're gonna keep building on this, and that is actually the main point of this challenge is work with existing code, like rework existing code, and because that's a thing that you will do a ton. You'll rework code that you'll spend most of your time reworking code that you or somebody you're working with wrote a while back to make it do a little more. Most software development is of that nature rather than start fresh and build something completely new, right? Like almost all the time you are adding new stuff on top of what already existed. So I think that's good practice. And but again, like the point is like the sample code that you've got, like this is yours. You can do whatever you feel like you need to do with it. All right, so the first thing we need to do is make a crate class. And this needs a location. It can be settable, and it also needs a is intact. This one need so the location can be get only, the is intact must be settable. I'm going to initialize this to true, which is not what it normally initializes to. Like usually bools, the default value is false. So I definitely want to make sure that any new crate that comes into existence, it's intact. And then we need to initialize, like we need to set up the location. So I could make this settable and then just new crate and then set its location property. What I'm going to do instead is initialize it this way so that it always has a location, which means I can come up here. I'm just going to go ahead and, well, I'm not going to, well, okay, a couple steps back, getting ahead of myself. So first of all, like it's convenient that location was separated into its own class here, because now I'm able to reuse the location for the crate class, which has nothing to do with the hinge. So now I'm reusing the location class, which is great. It's already there. Problem solved. Like I don't have to rewrite location in order to have location, because this program already has a defined version of what that looks like. And then it gives us essentially this like partial code for the main method, which I'm gonna drop in here. And then like we got to fill in some stuff. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just make this compile even while being wrong. Oh, that's a little weird that I got that in there twice, isn't it? Don't need it twice. Must have hit paste twice. Oh, you know what? I did skip this display. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, like, we have a display method that's actually pretty close. So I'm going to start with that. And some people would say, well, if you're copying and pasting, you should not. You should just reuse it. And they're not wrong. Like if the code is the same, or if it can be made to be the same, it's better to call a single method than it is like, so like maybe there's room in here for us to make a method that's like draw a character of a particular color at a particular location. And if I had like a public static class console utilities, and then public static void draw character, and then what did I just say? So like a location, color, character. All right, like I actually could, like that's essentially what we got here. So like maybe this is worth doing. I actually didn't expect to even be thinking about this until just now. Like in theory, I've now made this generic enough that I can reuse it in both places. So now I could just say console utilities dot draw character location new color white, and then do that. Like I can do that, and then I can change my other place to also do this. And then if there's something about this I need to make a change to, I can make that change in one place. That adds yet another class. I'm not saying that this pathway is wrong. In fact, there's a lot that I like about it. But what I am going to say is I'm not going to do that officially right now. I'm going to back this up. And so anyway, but the point is, from a software design perspective, there are people who are going to say, well, if you're copying and pasting, it probably means you should like not um like find a different way to do that. And they're not wrong. But here's the reason why I think maybe I don't need to do that. It's like this code here ends up being much simpler. Like I don't need anything too fancy. So I'm just going to display in white just an asterisk. So maybe that other code is helpful. Maybe it's not. But anyway, there it is. So I've got that, and now I can come into here and um, make my crates. And this is going to be a little boring. I'm just going to hurry up and throw these in. Now I've got my crates. I need to do the same thing with these hinges because these are, I mean, we made them in the previous challenge. Um, so this is just copying data from in the expansion. So now we have all the hinges and all the crates. These are all like made hard coded ahead of time, and I think that works. Like we could, if we want to get creative, we could like randomly pick these, but we haven't learned about the random class yet. We'll get to that. Um, this says make my current hinge be the first one, and then loop until forever. Figure everything out. Draw all the crates. Draw all the hinges. Get a key and handle the user input. If it's spacebar, like this code, like I thought about asking people to like write this code, but I don't. This is more about objects and making objects work together than it is about like the algorithms and the logic. So I just gave this to people. Um, oh, you know what? I know. I'm remembering now. I missed something else. It calls this out, but this display should only display it if it's intact. So if is intact, do this stuff, except that I'm actually going to flip the logic around and say, if it's not intact, let's just return. And then I'm just going to delete these and unindent these, that. So if it's intact, if it's not intact, just return. Otherwise, we'll just carry on. So with that, we should be able to run this. Like there's still a couple more places to fill in. But I should be able to move. I can't move side to side. I can move up and down. And I think I ought to be able to hit spacebar and get rid of that target. It went away. I can't move side to side, so I can't get to the other ones. But if I hit 2, now I'm controlling the second one. So I can, but the 3, 4, 5, 6, those don't change what I'm doing. So that's the last piece to sort out. This shouldn't be too difficult. We basically want to make this work with X and the left and right arrows. And then for this, we just want to pick up the other hinges. So by the way, these D4, D5, these are the number bar, like the numbers above the letters that on the keyboard. If you want like the numpad, that's like numpad 0, 1, 2. So like you could do that. Or you could say if it's D1 or numpad 1. So that way, no matter which one you push, it'll work. You don't need to do that for this challenge. You're welcome to do it if you want. But now I can move side to side. Those like less than, greater than 0, and 9, like making sure I don't like wander too far. Because if I try to move like -1 and then I try and draw something at -1, it'll blow up. So, but now I can make all of these. Uh-oh. Oh, okay, there we go. My A doesn't work. All right, so that's it. Like there's little things you could do to make it better. Like I don't like I there's a part of me that wishes, and it's not hard to do. You just draw the the current henge again. Like the fact that this T hides behind everything else. If I've got it selected active, it'd be nice if it were shown on top. You could do that. Definitely little room, ways to improve this, but that's the whole challenge. So like I said, these challenges, these last two are like they're definitely going to make you think about objects and things like that, how to make this all work together. But hopefully, it gives people a bit of a feel for how am I going to make these objects play nice together to do something that's actually like relatively interesting to see on the screen. So that's the whole thing. So all the challenges in here, and so that's it for the video. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you guys next time.